Hi, I have just finished my first conversation with Mandell Conway, who I met on the Story Skills workshop just over, well, almost a year and a half ago. And Mandell is a sweet soul that turns out is a lover of books as much as I am. So we have spent the better part of an hour speaking about books. And then tagging onto that, writing, which we both do as well. Mandell has a blog where he posts daily, which you will find in the show notes. So make sure to listen in on this conversation where we go both deep and wide to books and shame and fear and writing and love and professionalism. So there's something for everybody. Tag along and have fun. Hi, Mandell. How are you today?
I am doing well. How about yourselves?
I just had lunch outside in the garden. It is almost 15 degrees Celsius, which is 60 plus, so it's not warm, but warm enough to sit in the sun and eat lunch.
Yeah.
And read a book, which was lovely. I needed that. I've been stuck in front of the computer in meetings and stuff all morning. So
What book are you reading?
I am reading a Swedish book that uh, it's called
Stole.
Stöld by Ann-Helén Lestadius, and it's in Swedish. She is from the Same people, so
Mm,
it speaks about. It's a. I actually tweeted and Instagrammed about it this morning because it really hits home.
mm,
Not because it is my story, because it's so not my story that's told. It is the telling of the story of the Sami people, which is the indigenous people of Sweden and Norway and whatever up there north. Um, and how, the national states have really done them a number, have really messed up the the relations between the Sami people and Swedes or Norwegians, etc., but also between the Sami people. So there's a lot of 100-year-old baggage, trauma, um, being displaced, being mistreated, being, like indigenous people in the US as well,
mhm.
removed from your family, friends to go to a school where you were punished if you spoke your language and, all of that stuff. And stöld means theft,
Stiff?
theft,
Oh,
theft.
theft. Okay.
Yep. So it is about how the some locals up where the fictional story um, is made continuously steals reindeer, which is
Mm,
the part of the tradition of the Sami people to tend to reindeers,
mm,
and how the police just won't do anything. And of course, they're not stolen; they're murdered, they're killed, they're butchered, right,
mm,
and tortured. These reindeer, but it is like written off as theft, and then it's written off by the police because there's just never any evidence.
mhm.
So you have, in this book, it like ranges over 10, 15 years, and there's like hundreds of thefts with bunny ears. Um, and it hits home in the sense that the frustration, the worry, the anxiety, the inability to actually get a change that needs to be happening to make it happen, how to do that. This sense of being tied behind your back, you really can't. So it's really well written. Um, and I shared a quote from it this morning, which basically said, um, let's see, I will bring it up because I really liked it and I think I can translate it. It said, "You have to laugh, otherwise, your body dies from within.
Mm.
It's stored everywhere, the body stores pain." And I just thought, "Oh yeah, that's true." So it's really well written and there's lots of the language is beautiful and it talk about a bittersweet. This is a bittersweet experience to read this book.
Mhm.
Um where you can see the love for the land, for the place, for the culture, for the nature, for the reindeer, and etc. And have this cultural appropriation and diminishment and, all of that stuff. Uh, yeah. So that's what I was reading because and I really want to finish the book. It's good.
Yeah, and I see it's a pretty heavy book, literally and and ideally. I feel like I always learn something when I talk to you. I remember our last conversation, we were talking about the trees and how you're giving back and growing trees and things like that. So
Yeah.
another lesson, another day.
Yeah. Do you read?
Yeah, I do. I also love to read, and sometimes I get in the rut where I'm not reading as much as I want to. I should say. There's been there's been years I've read 50 books in a year, and then some years it was like, man, I only read 20 books this year, and I'm down on myself. But sometimes it happens like that. Some books are bigger, heavier. Um, but right now, I just started a book by David. I think as you pronounce it, Hyatt.
Yeah.
He-
The UK guy?
yes, exactly.
Hit,
I'm
Hyatt
reading.
Denim guy? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm reading a book he wrote. It's called Do Open. It's about newsletters, writing newsletters. And I don't really have any plans for newsletter, but I'm just curious about just writing in general. So I was like, I love his writing and some of the things he does. And
Have you
uh,
taken any of his courses or their
no,
courses, the Duda lectures?
I haven't. I want to take. There's one recently. He came out with Lazy Discipline, and I was looking at it like, man, I want to do that one, but my schedule doesn't let me go to the UK right now. So what I did was I brought the online version, and as soon as I get some space in my schedule, I'm gonna take that one.
I did, the keyboard CEO,
Mm,
keyboard CEO,
I seen that one.
a year ago, and
How was that?
it was it was interesting doing that after having done I did story skills a couple of months before that, and then, a year before that, or half a year before that, I finished
Mhm,
the creatives workshop, so 2 really heavy, really heavily engagement Akiba workshops,
mhm,
and then doing the keyboard CEO was it was interesting to notice the difference in how I respond, how I interact, how I engage. They use Slack. They set up a Slack channel for
mhm,
the keyboard CEO, and, Slack just isn't my thing.
mm.
And that discourse is my thing, right? Because discourse in a discourse forum, I can really be all over the place and
Yeah,
I enjoy it a lot.
mhm.
And I probably have read everything that everybody has shared in the Slack too, because I do that. But there's just something about the setup that just doesn't get me as riled up, as
Mhm,
energized, as bubbly.
mhm,
Um, and then I think if it was 3 weeks and it was kind of um, jam packed. So I think it was 6 lessons, kind of, but in 3 sessions where it was first one lesson and then the other lesson. So 2 lessons per session. And they were just high tempo,
mm,
cram as much as possible into it. So
yeah,
it was valuable and there's good stuff there, but I don't really think I have any contact with anybody because it doesn't make for as good a substrate for growth as
Mm,
a discourse forum for
mhm,
me
mhm.
again.
Yeah.
Um, so it was like, yeah, this was interesting because I noticed that I didn't dive into it fully
Mhm.
the way that I have the two Akimbo workshops that I've done.
Yeah. That's always interesting to hear. I was literally just on a call with someone who, I'm coaching the Alt MBA right now, and he's a student in Alt MBA, and Slack is one of the ways they communicate in Alt MBA. And he was saying how much he loves it because his job that he's with, it's a 100-year-old company, and they don't have Slack. And if he even presented it, they'll look at him like he was crazy. They do email still. Oh, still like email's ancient, but they do email. And he was saying how different it is because he has like a perfectionist syndrome, and Slack kind of takes him out of that because it's so quick and it's just texting. But email kind of reinforces his perfectionist because he's like, oh, he has to read it 100 times. He's going through. But Slack is just, oh, if it's a mistake, it's a mistake. I can edit it, whatever. He's less in his perfection mode. So he was saying how much he loves Slack, and he's sad that his his company doesn't have it. And then hearing your perspective is very interesting. And then on top of that, just knowing about workshops in general, how the different ones are, like discourse is, you're interacting versus not having a discourse, self-paced with a community versus not, the percentages of people that finish versus who
It's
don't.
I suck at self-paced, no community. I bought the Wim Hof Foundation course February of last year, so 14 months ago. I have done one video. It's the 5-minute safety video. That's the only one I've done, and I really know that if I were to do it, I would get a lot out of it. But
Mhm.
there's nobody to hook arms with.
Yeah,
It's so
exactly.
much more fun for me if I can hook arms, and I like to hook arms with, a ton of people.
Yeah.
Um, so it is really I've also been, like, reflecting on the difference of these things,
Mhm.
and how also, of course, there's probably people listening to this who go, "Oh, no, self-paced is the shit. It works so well for me," and it probably does. So
Yeah,
it's good that there's a variety, and I
exactly.
think it's really good for me to have possibly finally found out that I should just never sign up for any self-paced stuff at all. It's just a waste of, and I don't know how many of those I've bought over the
Yeah.
years, but it just doesn't work for me.
I'm more with you. I'm more community for sure. It's something about other people, like knowing that you're not just showing up for yourself, but also for other people, and they're kind of depending on you for feedback and for your thoughts. And I'm the same way. I've done courses where there's no community, but it's not the same. I wasn't like, oh my god, I can't wait to get home to read it. The same way I was with story skills. Like last time we spoke, you shared how I would hop on Zoom calls from all over, and I
Yeah, because
wouldn't.
you were always walking with a mask on because it was like end November, December, and beginning January of 2021, right? That
Mhm.
was when it was, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and I was just so I didn't wanna miss any calls because it was just so good. I'm loving the community and everything like that, so that's how it was, and, it's
but
interesting.
why were you always on foot, walking somewhere, getting somewhere, going somewhere?
Yeah, that was just work. Like, I would go into work, and I'm like, "Oh, I gotta go on this call," and so I'll just be walking. Let me just walk outside so no one would talk to me. Because for whatever reason, even if I'm on a call, people will just still talk to me at work, so I was, let
Crazy.
me just walk outside or walk somewhere
So
instead
it
of.
was your way of making sure that you could be there.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
I got that. Got it. Got it.
Yeah, and I remember you were always on your couch just noodling,
Eh,
and
eh,
I think it
eh.
was a cat. You have a cat, right?
I have a
Yeah.
cat. He's lying over there in a in an armchair. Let's see if you can see
Okay.
him over
He's
there.
hanging oh, yeah, he's hanging
He's
out.
hanging out. Pop the cat. Yeah. He's still a feature.
I'm curious though, the keyboard CEO, is it just like, "Hey, how to be a CEO better," kinda thing?
No, it isn't. It is how to be a better CEO when you're basically a one-man show.
Mm,
So it is for, solopreneurs or
mhm,
really small company business
mhm,
owners, I would say general a bit, but it works for, if you're a project manager and you're running some little project or, so it's not, you don't have to be a CEO.
okay.
But what it's really pointing to is rather the power that exists if you have a keyboard. If
Mm,
you have a computer with a keyboard, there's so much you can do, and that it doesn't necessarily have to be such a big deal. So they're
mm,
really into the concept of just start, just do it.
mhm,
You don't have to figure out the whole thing, just start.
mhm,
How do I make myself more visible on social? Well, forget about that. Open a
mhm.
Twitter account or an Instagram account and just start and see
Yeah,
what works.
mhm,
So I would say that's probably the the one thing that the entire course pivots around is like, just do it.
okay.
Don't make it harder on yourself.
Mhm,
Just do it and make it as small as possible so that you can do it. You
mhm,
know, if you're a stay-at-home dad and you have toddlers and whatnot, and the dog needs to be walked, it's like, okay, but then it's like 5 minutes in the morning before anybody else in the family has gone up. Sit up, do some meditation, and maybe write in your journal
mhm,
and send a tweet about that. Or, just make it as small a baby step as you can to start to get the ball rolling. Um, and then of course, David Hyatt is this marketing mastermind, right?
mhm,
So there's a lot of good tips
mhm,
on that, on what he's learned. And he does it or did it together with another man that I've now forgotten his name.
mm.
But so there
Is it
was
did he work
the
at Apple or something like that?
no,
Oh, okay. I know
no,
there was okay.
no.
Alright. I know there was one
Um,
gentleman he was working with, and I was reading up on him, and he had done, like, projects with Apple and Nike and a bunch of people. I was like, "Oh, wow, interesting."
I don't think so. I should.
Okay.
Oh, they're gonna. I promise I'll put a link to it in the show notes. I probably have him on
Oh, man. No, but that's good.
LinkedIn and Instagram or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was it's like it was yeah, it worked, but I
Mhm,
didn't get as much out of it as I would have if the community aspect had been a bigger part of it.
mhm. Yeah.
Um,
Interesting. I love hearing that, the difference between, um, how different people learn and the environments they learn in. So what did you think about the creatives workshop? Well, actually, you did the creatives before Story
yeah,
Skills, right?
I
Yeah.
did Pro 1, so I was in
Wow.
the original one, which was so this might sound like overly dramatic, but in a way, it's changed my life.
Mm,
Not because on the surface so much has really shifted, because it really hasn't, but because all of a sudden I found people who were more than, I have my mastermind groups and it's 10 years and I have my I have a group there. We call each other our wives. So I have my three wives and, so I have these smaller groups of people that I really feel are very dear and near to
mm,
my heart. But here, all of a sudden, it's like it opened up so that there were so many, and I enjoy the many.
mhm,
So it really did change my life. Also because I then continued on after the creatives workshop ended when we begged them to let us keep the discourse, and of course they wouldn't.
Mhm.
Um, Amanda Judd, with the help of a few others, started up the creative community on
Mm.
a discourse. So me and there's like probably 50 of us,
Wow.
most of whom come from the Akimbo world, not
Yeah.
everybody. And I don't know, half of them are active, but
Mhm.
that active half, mm, they are family. It's
Wow.
like near and dear to my heart.
Yeah.
And the there's power in numbers.
Mhm.
And that's really it because I've stepped in that community. And I am a part of that community and sharing me and being vulnerable and just the love that just being held by such a diverse group of people has just been absolutely, absolutely amazing.
Wow. That's like one of the greatest stories I've heard about creatives. But mostly what I hear is the challenge of just shipping something every day. Students that they just say like, "Man, it's so tough in 100
Yeah.
days."
Which wasn't that was a no brainer for me because I've
Mhm.
done that since I started doing that the first time in 2013.
Oh, wow.
So it's like that wasn't the challenge at all.
Yeah.
Which
That's
perhaps also then is why I could have the playroom in a sense to actually do the connection,
Mhm.
and just read up on a lot of stuff. And at the same time, there were like I think there were 400 plus people in that cohort, and half of them I would say were active because it started, I don't know, second week of February in 2020,
Mhm.
which was just when COVID was beginning to, like,
Mhm.
spread across the world. So a month later, the US was basically in lockdown, right? So
Mhm.
half of the people who had signed up basically fell off the wagon because, life,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and half of them kind of fell into it and
Mhm.
had it become like a central piece of life because of life, because all of a sudden you don't have work to go to and you can't do
Mhm.
the other thing. So the people that like me kind of fell into the creatives community, no, the creative workshop,
Mhm.
um, really formed some significant bonds. And there's
Yeah.
still people who took that workshop that I don't know.
Yeah.
Even though I think that I do read everything, apparently I don't. Mm.
Same way I feel about story skills. A bunch of people that I know were there and I've seen some of their work, but obviously there's some people that just stand out because we still speak like you and I and Michael and a few others, when we still have that communication. It's like, yeah, I remember your work and everything like that. So, story skills was my first akimbo. So that was definitely special for me for sure.
Mhm. Yeah. So how did you find Akimba?
So I found akimbo through Tim Ferriss. So he came out with a book years ago, Tools of Titans. And I brought the book and I was reading it and he did one with Seth Godin. I'm like, oh, who's this Seth Godin? And I was like, oh, this is cool. And so I started listening to the Tim Ferriss podcast. And one day he's interviewing Seth Godin and he's talking about what is school for? I'm like, man, who's this? I'm like, this is my kind of guy because I've never been good in school. So I'm like, man, I'm loving this. And he started talking about the Alt MBA. That was actually he didn't talk about any of the other workshops at that time. It was just the Alt MBA. I went home and I looked at it and I was like, oh, okay. I put it on the kind of to do later list. And then I signed up for Seth's blog. I was like, well, I'll check out this blog. And one day he just sends out this, if you want to learn how to tell better stories. I was like, oh man, I never knew that storage was kind of marketing and everything. Yeah, I'll do that. And so I signed up for it. And I did it, and it's been going on ever since. It's been going on ever since. So that's how I found the Kimbo.
Yeah, it's fascinating how the moments, the like little forks in the road if I look back on my life, it's like, oh, how many little forks in the road. If I had not taken the left turn
Mm,
but a right turn, what
yeah,
would have happened? You know?
exactly. Yeah.
Um, and that's like one of them, you know? Okay, you might have bought the book, you might have listened to it, but then maybe if you hadn't signed up for his blog, you
Mhm.
know, would we be here? Possibly,
Exactly.
possibly not, but we
Yeah.
would probably be differently here
Mhm.
for some other reason.
Yeah.
Um,
Actually, I love that thought, and I never thought about it in this way because as we were talking earlier, I love books and I love to read, and I'm always encouraging people to read. You know, sometimes people ask me questions and I'll give them like a book. Like, "Oh, your answer's here. It's not with me." And that just makes me more encouraged about reading because I love to read, I brought the book. And because I love to read, I read the book. And then it led me to the podcast, which led me to Seth, which led me to Akimbo, which has changed my life in multiple ways. How I learn, how I grow, the people I've met, the connections I've gotten, the opportunities that I've gotten to do work. And it all started with a book.
but I think it is Ramit Sethi, the "I will teach you to be rich" dude,
Mhm.
who says, um, "If you ever have any inclination to buy a book, you buy the book."
Mhm.
You know, don't ever scringe on that. Don't ever say, "Oh, no, I don't have the money for it," etcetera. It's like, buy the book because you
Yeah.
just don't know. It just
Yeah.
might be one of those, wow, total, total game changer.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, I totally agree with that. It's funny because Tim Ferriss often tells a story that growing up, he didn't grow up with a lot of money. His parents didn't have a lot of money, but his mom always brought him whatever book he wanted. Like that was one thing she did not save, like, oh no, I can't get you the book. It was just, oh, if you want a book, I'll get it for you. And then I remember as I didn't always love to read, but as I began to learn and like to read and fall down these rabbit holes of self-development, I wouldn't buy books unless I was reading them. And then if I read a book, I would finish them. And then I read somewhere where someone was saying it's okay to have a bunch of books in your house that you haven't read. Just look at it as you have all this wisdom accessible to you. At any moment you want to go get it, you can get it versus, oh, I need a book, and you got to go somewhere and you're looking. Now I can just walk downstairs and I have 50 books that I've never opened, but at any notes moment's notice, I can just grab, okay, today I wanna talk about prayer, I wanna talk about entrepreneurship or whatever and just get it. So
yeah.
it's so good that you said that.
I have behind me, there's like, I don't know, it's probably 40 centimeters of books from Better World Books, which is this online, I think only online, books shop. That's one of the good guys, bunny ears good guys, um, where they have a lot of used books. You can buy new books too, but you can buy used books. You can find all sorts of really weird books that aren't really out there anymore. And for every book you buy, they donate a book to someone who needs a
Oh,
book, who
wow.
can't afford it and whose mom can't afford it. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I've probably donated like 50 books, because I've bought 50 books. And it is, like you say, it is this sensation that I have all of these great books. And
Mhm.
I have I have gone through cycles when it comes to my reading, both in how much I read. Right now, I'm in this year has just been crazy. I think that I am reading, let's see, it is April 28th, and I have so far this year read 51 books.
Oh, wow.
So I've just been,
Yeah.
which is kind of, that is really weird even for me. Um, but I've had years when I've read nothing, but that's basically 1 year in my life.
Mhm.
Um, but I had a decade and a half, where I didn't buy any books at all. I just
Mm,
used the library.
mm,
And here, at least in Malmö, where I live, you can also ask the library to make a purchase of a book if they
mm,
deem it to be a worthy enough book for the library. So
mm,
I've used that option a lot too.
mhm,
And then I started to buy books again 5 years ago or something. And now I buy books that I want to write in because I do
mhm,
marginalia, which I also would never have done
mhm,
uh, prior. It's like it's something that started in the last 10 years or so. So I highlight and star and heart and make little
mhm,
dog ears and stuff because there's so much in it that I want to keep. So the books that I buy are books that I believe I want to highlight and do marginalia in. Whereas Stöld, as lovely as it is a library book because it's like few fiction books fall under the I want to keep this book. I want to have it
mhm,
handy.
mhm,
Um, so there's a difference. I use a lot of I use the library a lot and I buy books right now, uh, at this moment of time. And then I have a little bookshelf in the hallway, where I put books that I own that I want to donate.
mm,
So I have a little note saying, please help yourself to a book.
mm.
So that people who come here, they browse and see, is there anything new here? And then they take a book with them, which
Oh, nice.
yeah.
Wow, that I've never heard of. That's a good
So yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the books in my house, at least my bookshelf downstairs, is often a conversation piece because the way it's positioned in my living room, you kinda just see it and it's like, "Oh, you have that book too?" Or, "I heard about this book," and then we'll just go into that book and you'd be there all night and it all started from that one book that we both share in common, or we just you just heard about the book. And I remember one day my own brother came over and he grabbed 2 books and just sat at the table and just started to read it. I'm like, "Oh, okay, that's how you spend the rest of that's how you're gonna spend the rest of your evening?" And he's just sitting there reading. So, yeah, books, there's so many benefits to having books in the
Yeah.
house and reading and things of that nature.
So what's one of the books that you most treasure?
Ooh, it's a good question. Without question, The Four Agreements is a book I think about often.
I
And
still have not read it.
oh, okay. And the reason is one of the four agreements is don't take it personal. And so I always have to catch myself when I'm about to take something personal. And so I think about that book all the time for just that one agreement. Um, but there's so many. I think about Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art often, just whenever I don't want to do something, and I'm like,
Procrastinator, yeah.
yeah, I was like, oh, that's just the resistance, and so my mind will go to Stephen Pressfield. Um, Even How to Win Friends and Influence People, the importance of remembering names or letting
Which is
someone off
Dale
the
Carnegie, right?
yeah, Dale Carnegie, yeah, letting someone off the hook. Seven Habits of Highly Effective People. I love the idea of sharpening your saw,
Stephen Covey?
yeah, Stephen Covey, yeah. So, yeah, those are some of the ones, but there's so many that I mean, I often read books and I'm like, "Man, should every book I find be this amazing to me?" Because every book I'm like, "Wow, this is like the greatest book ever."
Do you read any fiction, though, or do you just read, um,
Yeah, I
I don't know
have,
what the other stuff is called, the
yeah,
nonfiction?
I have The Alchemist right here. I haven't
Ooh, that's a favorite.
I haven't read it yet, but I don't know, I keep finding myself just reading nonfiction, but I have The Alchemist and I have another. Um, so I do wanna try my hand at fiction, and I'm sure that'll be a whole 'nother journey and
Yeah. And The Alchemist is I read that book years ago, and
mhm,
then last year in the creative community, we have a book club, and we were doing The Alchemist, and before, I have been a give me a physical book and nothing else kinda gal,
mhm,
and it's like, I can do ebooks, when I'm traveling or something because I know that nowadays I just don't pick up a physical book if I have it with me anyway. So I stopped doing that. But then I've just never really been into audiobooks at all. But
Mhm.
Matthew found a recording, an audiobook recording of The Alchemist with Jeremy Irons, the
Mm.
British actor, reading it. Fuck, it is so good. So I listened to that one like 2 times over the course of a weekend or something
Oh,
because
wow.
it's just so well read. He reads it so gloriously good. Um,
So maybe I can do that. Yeah, you just give
so
me an
you can
idea.
do that too. Yeah, it
And
is. But
where
make
can
sure
I get
you
that?
get the Jeremy Irons one. You can get it on YouTube. You can get it on
Okay,
Audible. You could probably get it
okay.
everywhere, but it is on YouTube as well.
Oh,
Or was probably illegally, but,
yeah.
hey, what
Maybe
the
Audible.
heck?
Yeah.
Audible, I think, has it. Yeah, because
Jeremy,
it's
let me write
Jeremy
his name down.
Irons. Yeah, Irons.
I wish, you and I had spoke maybe 3 days ago, because 'cause I've been in the car for about 6 hours within the last days, and I coulda just finished I
You
coulda
could have
just finished
finished that one because it's not that
it.
long. I think it is
Yeah.
like 4 or 5 hours or something.
Yeah, so I could have already
S
knocked it out, but I'm glad you said that. That'll be a way I consume it. Because 'Cause I'm not a audiobook fan only because I take a lot of notes, and I don't wanna be driving and trying to take notes or trying to hold an idea in my head, and I'm like, "Wait, what was that again?" And I gotta go back, so I've just never dove into it. Some people I know, they do amazing with it, like, they commute to work, they're in traffic a lot, so they say they do fine with it. But I've just never been that tight, but, I'm definitely gonna check that out now.
Yeah, and it's like I did last year. Yeah, the end of last year, the beginning of this year, I read, Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall
Mm,
Kimmerer, which is just
I have that too, yeah.
gorgeous book. It's a gorgeous book.
Mhm,
And when I finished reading it, then I actually started to listening to it as an audiobook as well. So I've both read it and listened to it, and
mhm.
she reads it herself. She narrates it, and she does it beautifully. And she's a good storyteller,
Oh,
and
yeah.
she's a good story writer because the way that she tells the book is the way that I perceive that she's telling the book when I'm reading it too.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
they are very like it is 2 different mediums, but it's her voice comes across really clearly. So that's also an audiobook that I really, really, um, really enjoyed. But I I like you, I have since I've started to do marginalia, I really want it's like so there are some podcasts that I usually listen to them when I'm out walking. It's like there's some that are just there's just so much good stuff, and it's like I can't stop every minute and,
Yeah.
jot something down or just take a screenshot of the minutes
Mhm.
into where was something good.
Yeah.
Um, so there are books that I much prefer reading because then I
Mhm.
can do the notes easier than if you have to stop and pause and rewind and, it's like, uh, but yeah, books. I love
Yeah,
them.
and Braden Sweetgrass's great book. I actually had a chance to read it with a book club I'm part of, and I love it because it's never a book that I would naturally pick up. And so when it was introduced, it's like, "Oh, okay, let me read this." I'm like, "Wow, this is a whole different world," and I loved reading it. And then there was a student that's a part of not a student, there was another book club member that was a part of the group, and she was saying she listened to it on audio on a road trip and how much she loved it. And then someone else was sharing that they actually read and listen almost every book that they do. It like they use it as a way to deepen the information inside of them. So they'll listen to it in the car, then then they'll come home and then they'll read it. And I'm like, wow, like that
Yeah.
is like really letting the ideas
That's
sink
next
into.
level shit. That's
Yeah.
next level shit for sure. Um,
That is, yeah. But I'm curious, 51 books already in 4 months. So what's the most you've done in a year?
The most I've done in a year that I've counted, that I know that I've counted,
Mhm.
is a couple of years ago, I did 108 books, I think.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Um, 'Cause I keep track in Goodreads,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, and
Wow.
I kinda like that, but this year, I think I've set as my goal that I'm to read 88 books this year, because I didn't go into the year intending I need to break my 108,
Yeah, yeah.
it's like, and I might not.
Mhm.
Because it might be that, okay, now I have done my massive intake period because I'm good at intake. That's why discourse works for me. I'm good at
Mm.
intake. I can juggle all of that information coming into me. Um, and then perhaps it'll just be stop. Not anymore. Thank you.
Mhm.
Time to digest.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know.
Yeah.
It might not be that many books for the rest of the year, or it might be, in which case I'm looking at headed towards, 150, 200 books, which would just be ridiculous.
Yeah, that's
It's
insane.
like, no, I can't do that. That sounds horrible. Uh,
So with that many books, I'm curious, like, what's the reading habit like? Like, do you block out time every day?
no, but I take time. I mean, I don't decide. I read when I go to bed. I read.
And for how long are you reading every
That
night?
depends on how tired I am. That
Okay.
can be anything from, it's usually not less than 15 minutes,
50?
but
Okay, so hour.
but yeah, or 15 minutes even, it can
Mhm.
be that, but it can be 5 hours too.
Ooh.
That kinda depends on the book and how,
Yeah, yeah.
because there are some books that I just have to finish them, and it doesn't matter,
Mhm.
it's 200 pages left. Well, then you read until 3 in the morning, which has
Mhm.
happened many times. Um, and then I have I gifted myself a morning ritual, um, a year and a half ago, where I I give myself time in the mornings. So I wake up, I don't have an alarm clock, and I work from home, and I'm self-employed, so I usually since that time a year and a half ago, I don't have anything starting before 9 a.m.
Mhm.
normally. And I usually wake up around 6.
Mhm.
So I read, I meditate, I
Mhm.
journal,
Mm.
so it can easily be 2 or 3 hours in the morning too.
Mm.
And then, lunch in the garden, or I sit in the sofa or in the armchair reading. And it depends a lot on the books. This past weekend, I have finished off the last in a fantasy series called The Throne of Glass by Sarah J. Maas, who writes excellent fantasy. Oh, it's so good. And I had the sixth and the seventh book in the series, the final two books. And I mean, this is not a brick compared to those books, because they
Yeah.
are like, the sixth book was like 680 pages and the seventh book was like 1,000. So I just, I just read, I just soak in them.
Mm.
So those two books were like, yeah, that was the end of last week and my weekend. Um, Crying and, it's like, yeah, I love it. I love books because they do allow me to travel,
Yeah.
They get me to, all of a sudden I'm a witch in a
Mhm.
fantasy land, or I'm an Egyptian prince or slave or Indian goddess, or, it's like I can be, or a young Scottish male 700 years ago. Like I can be
Mhm.
so many different things, uh, right here from home. It's like it's a travel in the imagination that just I so love and enjoy. So yeah, I'm a book buff, for
Would you
sure.
s would you say you read, pretty fast? above.
I am a fast reader. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Because I've
But
seen.
not all books though. So it
Okay.
does depend. I'm reading um Master and His Emissary by Ian McGilchrist, which is this 600 page book that is dense. So I can read 5 tops 10 pages and then I can't take anymore because it's
Mm,
just so it's like eating the richest mud cake you can. It's
mhm,
like even though you'd want to take the whole thing, there's just no way. You're not physically capable of eating that much mud cake.
mhm.
So there are some books that just I know that they will take months for me to read. So it varies, but in general, I am a very fast reader.
Okay. Man, that's amazing. 108 books. And, so out of the 51 so far, what are some that have absolutely stood out to you?
The Sarah J Maas books,
The
I must
fantasies?
say, the fantasy, and they're really good. She's a good author. I have read books all over. I've read The One Straw Revolution
Mm,
by Masanobu Fukuoka, a Japanese man who died in 2008,
mm,
who actually did a one straw revolution when it comes to farming.
mm,
That's it's a lovely little book, but it's not a gentle book. It's like there's some harsh truths
mm.
to that book, but it really impacted me um a lot. And then there's another book here for uh the Man Who Quit Money,
Mm,
written by Mark Sundin about a guy named Daniel Suelo. So that's a real life story. Um, Also really interesting. And I've been thinking a lot about money and um, market economy versus gift culture and all of that stuff. So this one is just thrown a little bit more wood on that fire, stoking my like, oh, there's something fascinating about it. So those are a few of the books that I read this year that have stood out.
have you read The Gift? You mentioned The Gift Culture versus Market Economy. I
I
know that book.
haven't,
Okay.
but Louise Hyde, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, no, I haven't read it yet, but it's on my to read list.
Mhm.
But there's like a hundred and no, there's 1,400 books on my to read list, so
Exactly. You'll get to it when you get to it. But
I
that is
will
one book
get
I
to it.
hear often when it talks about, the gift economy versus,
Yeah. Have
the
you
market.
read it?
I haven't. I have it on my shelf. Seth talks about it all the time, but
Maybe we should read it, Mandel.
yeah, maybe we can just read it together then.
Maybe we can read it together.
Let me know when you're ready to start. I know you have some thick ones already on your plate.
Yeah, I'll see if I can get a copy of it because I suspect that's one that I would want to have a physical copy of.
Yeah.
Um, I've read a book of his last year, also for the Creatives Community Book Club, on forgetting. Let's see what on the art of forgetting, maybe. Lewis Hyde. Let's see if I can find it. A primer for forgetting, getting past the past.
Mm,
That book was tankespjärn through and through because he basically says we need to forget more.
mm,
We have this thing about remember this, don't forget this. And he says, really? We should try to forget some more because this, that, and the other thing. And it just totally messes with my preconceived notions of so many things and just puts a whole nother spin on it. So that was an interesting read. Not an easy read, but an interesting read.
yeah.
You know,
Mm. Yeah. Well, let's see if you can get a copy. Where you gonna go to the library? Oh no, you say this is one you might purchase, right? So
I'll find it.
yeah.
I'll find it because that would be fun. That
Yeah,
would be fun
I've
to
heard
do.
so much about that book, and now that The Man Who Quit Money. I didn't know that there was another book that, I mean, of course, there's multiple books on multiple topics, but it's good to know a book for sure. So I'll be interested after reading The Gift. Will I be interested in The Man Who Quit Money to kind of add on? Because I like to do that also. I like to kind of get to a topic and just keep going on top, on top, on top, and seeing how good I can get on that one topic. So that's lovely.
Yeah. It's a good it's a good way, especially if you get, like, books where they come at a topic from different angles so that
Mhm.
you get
Yeah.
um, a broadening and a deepening somehow. It's like a
Mhm.
both and. You go deeper, but
Wider. Yeah.
also wider, right?
Definitely.
Um, I do. But that was interesting. Yesterday, I did a 1 hour, 1.5 hour seminar on shame.
Mm.
Uh, so I have a friend who has the largest private finance blog and pod and whatnot in Sweden. Um, and he has a discourse forum where there's like 14,000 members or something. So it's just huge.
Yeah.
Um, and he also has a Patreon community, and in the Patreon community, he does these topics now and again. So he'd asked me a couple of months ago if I wanted to join, and I was like, yeah. And it's like, could we talk about shame? It's like, yeah, because I'm
Mm.
really into this topic.
Mhm.
And yesterday, before the call, we hooked up on Zoom a couple of minutes before, and he was like, I've been trying to, let go of my control freak because I just know that you're not working like that. And I'm like, no. And then I showed him, I had this mind map that I did the night before. It's like, this is the evening. I showed it to him, and he just went, oh my God, I don't know that you should have shown me that. Um, but we had a really good time. But one of the things that it struck me was when I prepared for this Tuesday night, I was writing page after page after page after page, just realizing that I have material for a half day at least on
Mhm.
shame. Um, and I don't know shame theoretically. I don't know all of the research. I couldn't point to, I know Brene Brown and stuff. Yeah, sure. But I don't know any of the depth, the narrow depth of it. I don't know that. I haven't read up on all of that stuff, but I know shame personally. I know it because I've been relating with it for all of my life. But I've been doing a deep dive into shame for almost 2 years now.
Mm.
I've written like 150,000 words on it,
Oh, wow.
on my deep dive into my shame. So I'm like, I'm really familiar
Mhm.
with shame. Um, and it turned out to be a lovely conversation, interactive session, which is what I want. I don't want to preach. It's like I want interaction.
Conversation, yeah.
Conversation precisely. But so I'm doing, and I told Caspian, who's the tech guy for the pod, that I had material for half a day. So he's like, "Well, great. Throw out 3 dates and put it out there, and I'll set up this easy, sign up form in Airtable." So we did that. So now I'm gonna have like three uh 3 hour long deep dives into shame.
Mm.
The same thing, so to speak, uh, in May and June. And I'll see if anybody else wants to play along. Um, but it is lovely to, like you say, this is a topic that I know, and I pick up on shame in in books I read, or in pods I listen to, or films or series or conversations that I have, and in myself. So I'm like, I'm doing that thing where I'm getting more perspectives on it without treating it as a theoretical study. It's like I'm not reading up on it that way. Um, but I'm more embodying embodying it in a way. And you know, it's it's quite fun to see how the stuff that is there is then also fodder for conversation. It is fodder for like what helps me might also help you. If nothing else, it can inspire you to do something along the lines of, but in your flavor, whatever would work for you. Uh, Especially relevant when it comes to shame. 'Cause shame is such a deep, it's like it's our most base emotion, right? It's so down and it's so dark and hidden away because that's the only way that shame lives.
Mm,
It needs to be brought out into the light to be able to transform. That's the only way to do it. So you have to speak about it. And to
mm.
then be able to hold a space where people can start to like sense into their shame and start to share a little bit about their shame. It's like that is such a it's such a you know privilege.
I was gonna say it's a very vulnerable place too to get on and share about your personal experiences with shame, and I'm thinking now, how much would you say, having written 150,000 words about shame and read, how much is shame and fear connected?
Much. For me, much. And that this is the interesting part. So I'm also currently writing on a book on fear,
Mm,
which is based on 50 blog posts from the past 10 years that I've written about fear.
mm.
Because a couple of years ago, somebody asked me, have you written anything about fear? And so I searched on my website and I realized, shit, I have written about fear so much. And I think it is what you say. The fear is is a more visible feeling that is fueled by my feelings of shame.
Mhm,
So shame can translate for me into fear and into anger and stuff as well. But for me, um, they can be very closely related. And I think shame hinges on fear because shame is is at the root of it is this fear of being shunned, of
mm,
being kicked out of the
mhm,
of the group. So it is fear, and shame would be the thing that would get me kicked out of the group.
mhm.
So they are really holding hands.
Fear and
Uh,
shame.
yeah.
And when you said kicked out the group, my first thought was also the human emotion or the need of safety or feeling like one belongs and how that all ties together. Mm,
And if I then fear that what I'm most ashamed of will get me kicked out because it will prove that I don't belong, you know.
mhm.
So they are really doing a dance
Yeah, exactly. Wow.
within most of us, I think, or within many of us. I think most, possibly all, but and it's like shame is one of those things that we don't really speak about. And we can feel shame about so many things. You
Mhm,
can feel shame about money, about having too much or too little, or not,
mhm,
you can have fear about not doing enough or not being enough or being
mhm,
too much.
mhm.
Or you can have shame about showing your vulnerability and your weaknesses. So there's a whole field, you can kind of tackle shame onto anything,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
Um,
Which
yeah.
is kinda like fear, yeah. And I love how I was gonna ask, do you enjoy writing as much as reading? Because when you said 150,000 words and then all the blog posts and then writing the book, I'm like, man, the connection between reading and writing is clearly evident. Um, and I know people often say, which is true, that writing is so good because you get to clearly get out your thoughts. And the more you get out your thoughts, you kind of become like I hate to use the word expert, but you be kind of become proficient in that topic where somebody can come to you and say, "Hey, Helena, can you speak to me about shame?" It's like, yeah, I actually can. I have, not only do I have my own shame that I've dealt with for years, but I've written 150,000 words about it. So you've gotten so much ideas about this topic, so which makes writing just as great as reading.
Yeah, for me, they are very linked to my love of language, of words. Um, and I do love writing. I have read a lot more than I've written in the past 6 months. Um, so that's one of the reasons why the reading has been so massive, is that I actually haven't felt as inclined to write. But I do discover myself in writing when I'm writing. And right now, since a couple of weeks back, I've been playing with, I'm right-handed, but I've been playing with left-handed journaling.
Wow.
So I write something, I write a prompt in my right hand, either a prompt from my question that's going on in my inside of me, or from the therapy that I'm doing, or from somewhere else. And then I just let my left hand respond,
Mm,
which turns into this totally different thing. It My left hand holds clues that my right hand doesn't connect to, doesn't um cannot access, in a sense. Um, so I've been having some aha moments
mm.
uh, lately in playing with this. You can have a conversation between your left hand and your right hand too. Um, so I've been I've been deliberately stepping into writing more, and I've been deliberately stepping into writing physically rather
Mm.
than just computer,
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
that just
Yeah.
uh, but something else happens when it's my left hand that's
Mm.
holding the pen, so to speak.
That's like another level because there's always that debate, writing physically versus using your laptop. And I say it's a debate, but I think it's almost like scientifically proven that, especially with note taking, that it's better to do it with your hand because you're putting it in your words, which helps you remember versus typing. You type so fast, you put it in exactly how they're saying it to you. But still,
And there's a different kinesthetic to it. You are shaping
mm,
words
mm,
rather than
mhm,
you're shaping each letter as you write physically. There is something that happens. So there is more of the body of me involved
mhm.
when I write with my hands.
Yeah, I love that idea about shaping. Yeah, because it's something I've read about a lot. And one of the reasons I've done it, I've read about it a lot because not so much note taking. I rather take notes with my hands. And I mean, if I'm out, I'll take out my phone and type it in Notes or Evernote or Notion or whatever. But the thing about time, like there's been times I've got on my laptop and I've written a blog post or a story or something, and it was fine. And I was like, all right, it's cool. I got it done in a great amount of time. But when I hear people say like how you just said, like shaping words and getting your ideas out, and then I write something by hand, it takes more time because I'm writing it by hand. Then I have to go to the computer and type it.
And type it in. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's like a part of me wants to not write by hand because I can get work done faster by typing it. but
Me
I have
too.
to keep thinking yeah, but I have to keep thinking about better and not faster and, like, what's really better, and what I find when I write it by hand, I kinda see it in front of me, and I could just take my pen and just, "Oh, I wanna put this here and put this here," versus typing. I did recently read an article from New York Times, and I think they interviewed, like, 4 different writers, and they all had their own approach, and one guy said, like, he writes everything absolutely down first, then transfers it. Another gentleman said he only writes the outline out and then types it out from the outline. And then someone else said, I type out everything. And so it's interesting to see different approaches to how people do their writing. And part of it is probably what works best for you. But there is, like you said, it's been proven that there are some benefits to actually holding a pen in your hand and letting it touch paper and shaping your words. So
So I've seen on LinkedIn you post more or less daily, I think.
yeah, I try to. I sometimes forget to go to LinkedIn. I'm just now getting like used to LinkedIn. So
Yes.
sometimes I
Because
write.
you have the same on your blog? You have
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly. And so sometimes I get to LinkedIn, sometimes I don't, which I think is cool. It kind of encourages people to actually go to the blog and sign up
yes.
for the for the daily to get it, via email.
How long have you done the blog? How long have you done
Oh,
the daily writing?
I started daily writing. I actually started with morning pages. That was like my introduction to it. And that was an experiment of itself. But the blog itself started on February 19th. So it's been
Oh,
it's
this
very new.
year.
Yeah,
Oh,
exactly.
cool.
Yeah. So it's only
I
it's only
didn't
been
know
about
that.
yeah, it's only been about 3 months. And I'm learning a lot from the experience. And that's one of the reasons I've been looking this stuff up because I'm like, I'm gonna write every day. I need to make best use of my time. And this whole writing it out and typing it it's been a lot, but I'm like, hey, maybe there's a benefit in it of just writing it first. And then maybe there's a day I'm pressed for time and I want to just get something out. I do type it. I don't have to absolutely stick to a rule, but I've been playing with the idea and it's good to see how different people write.
Yeah, it is, because I've been the same. 2014, I had a coach, Carla, who gave me this glorious notebook that I used to do my version of the morning pages. But
Hmm.
when I write, and this is something that I've spoken about in my therapy as well, it comes out like wanting to be shared to a
Mm,
large extent. So for me, that aspect of, well, I don't write morning pages that are crap. It's like what I write is usually, worth reading for somebody else. So then efficiency kicks in. It's like, oh, I can't be bothered first writing the journal. And then, like you say, you have to transcribe it.
yeah.
Um, but I've been playing around a lot with the notion of what it is that I do and how I do things. So it isn't at the expense of me,
Mm,
and what do I do for me? What would writing for me
mm,
look like? It's like, I don't write if it's just for me. I
yeah.
write when I know that I share.
Hmm.
So it's like I'm a work in progress at the moment in this because so most of the shame material I have not shared publicly. It's
Hmm.
maybe a few things I've shared publicly. I've shared parts of it in my creative community, and I've shared much of it with my therapist.
Hmm.
Um, but there's always been this. This is going to be, material for a book
Hmm.
once I'm through it.
Hmm.
I need to be finished with this material before I would release it into the
Right.
world that way. But then I've been like, but what if I just wrote it for me? And it's just, it halts me in my tracks going, why would I? Why would I just write for me? Well, because it's of worth to me. Yeah,
Mhm.
but then it's of worth to somebody else too, and I just get stuck in this. So I'm I I'm working this at the moment,
Yeah.
pondering what it is that I do and how I put it up. And I just wrote 2 or 3 weeks ago, inspired by me and Reddy in season 2, had a conversation that we recorded on, I think it was February 24th when Russia went into Ukraine,
Mhm.
on violence.
Mm.
And that conversation sparked something. So I wrote a piece and I put it out a couple of weeks ago, which I then realized that was my first blog post since January 1st.
Mm.
So I really haven't been putting anything out there.
Yeah.
Um, but so yeah, it shifts. It's this dance. Where am I in relation to it? But I've coming back to you. I've really enjoyed reading many of your posts on LinkedIn because that's where I've seen them.
Yeah. Thank you.
Um, where where does writing come from when it comes to you? Where does your stories come from? The things that you write about.
Oh, just everyday life, things that I see and how I interpret the world. I kind of see a story in everything, or at least like a lesson or meaning in almost everything. I think part of it comes from just being so curious. And so I'm wondering in my head, oh, why did they do that? Why did they say that? Why did they go there? And I could investigate it with that person, or I could make assumptions or ideas or link it to something else that has happened that I know for sure has happened and kind of just write the story out that way. And one thing that I totally agree with that you said that resonated with me was I think you said your love for words. And I never really saw myself as loving words, but lately I've been kind of thinking that like, man, I kind of like words, or maybe if it's not loving words, it's the usage of words and how it is. Like, for example, copywriting is something that I've been into lately, and how people use words to persuade people to get people to action. And I'm like fascinated by, just a few words. It doesn't have to be a lot of words, or a story. And then next thing you know, they're offering you something. It's like, wait a minute. It's like, how did they just pull you in like that? And so, you know, words, I've saw myself coming to a place. It's like, man, I really like words and how they're used and stuff like that. Cause I never really wanted to be a writer, and I still don't. I'm more of a communicator. At least that's what I aspire to be. Just being able to communicate really well, whether that's orally or written word. It's just writing has so many benefits, and the morning pages kind of just got me in that mode already. And then, as I said before, it's a way to get out your ideas. So even if you're going to speak orally, it probably helps that you do some writing, you do some writing first, so you know the material. You hung out with the material, and then you speak about it. So, oh yeah, but yeah, that's where my writing comes from. Just like looking, and I often tell you I'm nosy. I'd like to look around and see and what's everyone doing and why are they doing it, and just finding meaning in it.
It is a when I started blogging daily 10 years ago, 9 years ago, I think it was kind of the same thing as when for my 40th birthday, just a year or 2 before that, I got this big digital camera, like, with zooms and stuff, manual and
Fancy.
automatic mode, whatever you call them. Systemkamera in Swedish. Um Which had me look at the world different. I could be driving and I would have to stop because I could just see that, oh, this would make such a gorgeous picture.
Hmm.
And starting to write daily. kind of had the same type of impact, influence on me, where all of a sudden, like you say, oh, I could write about that. And
Mhm.
that's really interesting. I wonder what, it's like, so all of a sudden I, I show up in the world in a different way, or I'm open to the world in a
Mhm.
different way. I take in the world in a different way when I know that I have these creative outlets that are accessible to me, that are, I'm using them. They're not stored in the basement, underneath 6 layers of carpet. They are actually out here ready to be used at a moment's notice because I am using them on a daily basis. So it's like it's it's a fascinating way of, yeah, opening, really. I
Yeah.
take in so much more when I know that I have this way of putting it back out there somehow.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I went to, have you heard of the band Fish, the rock band?
Is that the one that Brene Brown speaks about all the time? Maybe
Oh,
no,
does
it's
she?
not. No,
Oh,
no, that's
oh,
probably another 4 letter. No, I don't think I do.
okay, yeah, so they're this rock band here in the States, and I went to some of their shows last week, and even just standing in the show, I'm like, "Man, these guys have been this band has been going on for 30, 40 years." Like,
Maybe it
that's
is the one that Brene Brown speaks about. Yeah, well,
it
whatever.
possibly, and I'm just looking at them, and everyone's enjoying, the show, and I'm like, "Man, what mastery these guys have not fallen upon, what worked for 'em." I mean, like, they're in their 50s, and the drummer is insane still, and the electric guitar player, Trey, is incredible, and then I start thinking like, "All right, they have all these shows, they write all these songs, they rehearse for the shows, they record the songs, then they're in other bands." I'm like, "They are doing something so much over and over and over and over. They're just getting better and better and better, and it's becoming, I don't wanna say easier, but I mean, they're in a rhythm that they're just mastery, exactly what Robert Greene talks about with mastery, because they're getting so many reps in. I mean, if you imagine, doing something for 30 or 40 years, how good, no wonder he's one of the best guitar players. He's been doing it for 40 years. And then I just started thinking about that in other facets of life, even if it's writing. If you want to be a writer, imagine the kind of writer you could be, not today or tomorrow, but if you wrote every day for 40 years, like, how insane of a writer might you be? Or, it could be anything. It could be sports or playing chess. If you play
Yeah,
chess
or
every day.
cooking.
Mhm.
Yeah,
And so I was just sitting there thinking, because I mean, it's an amazing rock band, but they're amazing musicians, and it's just a repetition over and over the same thing. And then I was just thinking, man, you really got to love something to do it that much. I mean, I've heard they've had tours like 150 dates in a year, and now at an older age they put a restriction on it that they've agreed as a group to only tour 50 times a year. And
that's a lot of travel.
yeah, and I asked my friend who's like a Fish fanatic. I'm like, when are they with their families? Like, do they have time for themselves? He's like, yeah, they only tour 50 times a year now. I'm like, that's still a lot. Because you still have to write the songs and record them, and you have to rehearse them, and you have to travel. So that's a ton of time. But I mean, if you do something over and over, watching them was just like reinforcement that, don't measure yourself by a year or 2 years or 3 years even. I mean, these guys are talking decades of doing the same thing over and over. And, look at them. They're in their 50s and they sold out Madison Square Garden 4 nights in a row.
Yeah,
So,
and I think that aspect of loving it and being a professional. So
mhm,
it's like it's the person and being a professional at the same time.
mhm.
Because a professional, yeah, would you reach that? level of mastery, like you say, without the love?
Mhm.
Is that possible? I'm
And
not
showing up.
sure. I'm
Yeah.
not sure. Yeah. It's like, would you have the grit to
Yeah.
take it if there wasn't at the root of it some type of regenerative feeling? Like
Mhm.
fear isn't a regenerative feeling, right? But
Yeah.
love is. So if there's that, and I'm guessing, or for me, like revenge wouldn't be a regenerative feeling, even though I know that that has like had some people rise to levels of success, but there's something about it that feels off.
Mhm.
But when you rise to the levels of success, whatever success is for you, based on a love of something, can you be stopped?
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly the right question. Can you really? No, if you love it that much, right? And you just and I love how you use professional because it reminds me of the book we talked about, Stephen Pressfield, how he talks about what professionals do. And I'm sure on the 150 tour nights, there was a night where it was like, I really don't want to play. I still love playing, but tonight I'm just tired. Or tonight I'm just feeling this emotion, or I don't think I got this lick down right. But I'm a professional and 20,000 people paid to see me. And I agreed that I would do it. And so I'm going to go out and do it. And you go out and do it. And maybe when you're on stage, love takes over and you're like, whoa, I'm so glad I came out here. Maybe it doesn't, but you still did it as a professional. And no one probably knew in the audience that you were having your greatest day. And so, yeah, the being a professional about something you love, I mean, that's levels there.
Yeah. And I think Brene Brown's favorite band is Rush. So it was
Oh,
four
it's Rush.
letters at least. And
Okay.
Fish and Rush, the
Yeah.
last two letters are the same as well. So close enough. Um, yeah. So what do you love?
Mm, definitely people. That's one of my favorite things. Just conversations like this or even in person sometimes is even better for me. Just communication, talking to people, hearing about them, learning about them. I love learning, especially different cultures and human behavior. Why do people do the things that they do? And I love traveling, and it's all kind of linked. Communication, people, traveling, different cultures. I love food, and food again links it all. Having a meal with somebody and going to Ghana and eating a dish with your hands and washing your hands at the table where the other person pours the water on your hands for you, and building that bond and that relationship is just amazing. So those are some of the things that I absolutely love.
Gorgeous. That sent shivers down my legs. Uh, maybe that's a place to stop.
Yeah.
Send some of that love out to people. Maybe inspire them to reach out and have a conversation.
Hmm.
It's not a bad thing.
Yeah. Love is a good place to end and begin.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Well, thank you, Mandel, for this.
Thank you, Helena, for having me.
And I so look forward to our next four conversations.
Yes.
Because that is the beauty of this format of
Hmm.
not feeling like, okay, now we've begun something. Now I have to stop. But it's like, no, we've just begun something.
Yeah.
We have four more sessions to go to just go a little bit deeper and a little bit wider.
Hmm.
Um, so I look forward to that.
Likewise. Maybe we could start with something that you love, or
Maybe
the
we can
things that
start
you
with
love.
some if we remember.
Yeah, right?
Uh,
If
yeah,
you remember.
yeah, we'll see. We'll see. Well, thanks a lot.
Yes, thanks for having me. It was fun. Learned a lot as always, and now I'm like more curious about things.